I like to pretend my mornings are peaceful. I stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around my favorite porcelain mug, watching the thin curl of steam rise from the coffee. The mug is white with tiny pink flowers around the rim, worn in a few places where the glaze has faded. It used to belong to my mother. She drank her morning tea from it until her hands shook too much to hold it steady. When she died, it was the only thing I really insisted on keeping. Somehow, holding it makes the kitchen feel less empty. The house is quiet in that heavy way that makes you notice every sound. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock over the sink, the faint rush of cars passing on the street outside. Sunlight presses through the curtains, turning the cream-colored walls golden for a little while, softening the tiny cracks in the paint that only I ever notice. I painted those walls myself after my husband died, 7 years ago now. I remember standing on a stepladder in an old t-shirt, arms aching, tears drying on my face as I rolled that warm, safe color over the old gray. It was the first thing I did alone after the funeral. Back then, I told myself it was a fresh start. Really, I think I just needed something to control, something that would stay where I put it. The dining room opens into the living room, and from the kitchen doorway I can see almost everything. The dark wood table that used to sit in my parents' house, the matching chairs my father refinished by hand, the bookcase I bought second-hand in my 20s and never got around to replacing. Above the fireplace, there's our family timeline trapped in a neat row of frames. The kids in Halloween costumes, school photos with crooked smiles, awkward teenage years, Caleb in his graduation gown, Riley holding a scholarship certificate, and that one picture of all 4 of us at the beach, my husband's arm around my shoulders, his hair still more brown than gray. From a distance, it looks like a life that turned out all right. I take a sip of coffee. It's a little too hot, a little too strong. I drink it anyway. Caleb is already gone, of course. His boots thudded down the hallway just after 5, his voice low and rushed as he muttered something about a big pour today at the construction site, crews waiting, weather closing in. I heard the front door slam, heard his truck start, and then he was just gone. He leaves early, he comes home late, and somewhere in between I imagine there is a version of my son who laughs at jokes and tells stories and shares beers with his coworkers. That version doesn't have much to say to me. These days, dinner with him is an exercise in collecting small sounds. How is work? Fine. Busy. Yeah. Anything new? No. One-word answers, like he's rationing syllables. Sometimes I catch him staring at the TV over my shoulder instead of looking at me. Sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong and then feel silly, because surely we're both too old for that. Riley is still here. Not here, as in this room, drinking coffee with me, but here in the house. Somewhere above my head in her old bedroom, with the door shut and the curtains probably pulled tight. She's 38, but when she moved back in 6 months ago after the divorce, she dragged the same boxes down the same hallway, into the same room she painted purple when she was 16. She said it was temporary. Just until I figure things out, Mom. She wears sadness the way some people wear perfume, faint, but always there. It clings to her even when she smiles. She sleeps late, or maybe she just lies awake all night and only manages to drift off when the sky starts turning gray. On the mornings when I walk past her door, I can see the thin strip of light from her phone under the frame. Some nights I hear her crying. Some nights I pretend I don't. She comes out now and then, barefoot, eyes puffy, hair in a messy bun, to eat something over the sink and say she's fine. I'm okay, Mom, just tired. I'm fine, I just need time to heal. People talk about heartbreak like it's dramatic, loud, full of screaming and throwing things. Riley's heartbreak arrived quietly and sat down in the corner like an unwanted guest that refuses to leave. I carry my mug to the small table by the kitchen window and sit down, letting the sunlight touch my face. The yard outside looks clean and clipped, the grass cut in straight lines, the hydrangeas along the fence starting to bloom. The neighbors' houses stand in their familiar places, like they're part of a set on a stage that never changes. The world out there moves, but inside this house, most days feel exactly the same. When my husband died, I thought the house would swallow me whole. The silence felt violent then, sharp and cruel. The kids saved me from that. Caleb came over almost every night after work those first few months, still in his dusty work boots, tracking dirt on the rug I didn't have the heart to scold him about. Riley called me every day, sometimes twice, just to ask what I'd eaten, what I was doing, whether I remembered to lock the back door. They were my reason to get out of bed, my reason to cook something that wasn't cereal, my reason to pretend I believed them when they said it would get easier. So when they needed me later, I never questioned it. Of course, Caleb could store some of his tools in the garage while he figured out his own place. Of course, Riley could move back home after walking out of a life that had blown up in her face. This house has always been open for them. It's the only thing I have left that's big enough to hold all of us. My days now are simple enough to fit on an index card. I wake up at 6. My body does it on its own. I don't even need the alarm anymore. I shuffle into the kitchen, start the coffee, and make breakfast. Eggs, toast, sometimes pancakes if I'm feeling sentimental. Most of it goes cold. Caleb leaves too early. Riley wakes too late. I wrap things up, slide them into containers, label them in my neat handwriting, lunch or for later, as if that makes a difference. After breakfast that isn't really breakfast, I clean. I wipe counters that were already clean. I straighten cushions on the couch. I dust the same shelves I dusted 3 days before. I water the plants in the living room, checking each leaf for brown spots like a doctor checking a patient's pulse. The plants, at least, respond to my care. They lean toward the light. They grow. The television keeps me company in the background. Morning news. Some talk show with bright, loud people arguing about things that don't touch my life. I watch just enough to feel like I still live in the same world as everyone else. Then I mute it when the noise gets on my nerves. I make lunch, even though no one really sits down to eat it. Caleb grabs something on site, he says. Riley takes a plate upstairs, the fork clinking on porcelain as she retreats. I eat standing at the counter half the time, staring at the same corner of the same tile, wondering when I started doing that. Afternoons drift. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I fold laundry that doesn't seem like it should belong to 2 grown children and 1 old woman. Sometimes I just walk from room to room, straightening picture frames that haven't moved. By the time I start dinner, the house feels like it's holding its breath. I set the table anyway. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware. I try new recipes now and then, something I saw on TV, some casserole a neighbor mentioned. Most nights we don't actually sit down together. Caleb gets home late, drops into a chair with his shoulders slumped and his eyes half closed, picking at his food and saying he's just tired. Riley wanders in later, microwaves a plate, and eats in front of her phone, scrolling through a life she doesn't live anymore. When I finally sit, the chairs around me are often empty. The clink of my fork on the plate sounds too loud. The clock over the doorway tracks every second of my silence. From the outside, you'd think everything is fine. The house is tidy. The bills are paid on time. No one is screaming. There are no broken dishes, no slammed doors, no neighbors whispering on their porches. If you walked past our window at night and glanced in, you'd see a normal house with normal people moving through it. But inside, it feels like someone turned the color settings down on my life. Days blend together so smoothly that sometimes I have to check the calendar to remember if it's Tuesday or Thursday. I catch myself thinking, did this already happen, or am I just remembering yesterday? My routines run one into the next, like lines of ink bleeding into each other on cheap paper. Lately, when I lie in bed at night and stare at the ceiling, a strange thought slips in and refuses to leave. My life is starting to feel like a painting left out in the rain, the edges blurring, the details fading, everything running together until you can't tell one day from the next. Like watercolors in the rain. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the quiet and all the routines, something in me is waiting for the moment when everything finally smears. The first time I heard it, I thought it was part of a dream. A single, sharp plink in the middle of the night. I opened my eyes in the dark and stared at the faint rectangle of the window across the room, listening. The house settled the way old houses do, with soft cracks and sighs in the wood. My heart beat a little faster, just from the fact that I was awake when I wasn't supposed to be. Then it came again. Plink. Not steady, not the soft, even drip of a faucet someone forgot to close all the way. This was irregular, almost hesitant, like the sound was deciding whether or not to exist each time. I lay there, holding my breath. My bedroom is directly under the upstairs bathroom. I've lived in this house long enough to know where every pipe runs, which board creaks, which vents rattle when the heat kicks on. This didn't sound familiar. It didn't belong to any of the usual nighttime noises. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe Riley hadn't turned the faucet off properly after one of her late-night showers, that maybe a drop of water was just stubbornly fighting gravity in the pipes. I rolled onto my side, pulled the sheet up, and closed my eyes. Plink. I checked the clock. 2:17 a.m. I dozed, drifted, woke again to that same wrong rhythm. Sometimes minutes passed between drops. Sometimes a few seconds. It was like a tiny, water-based Morse code above my head, saying something I couldn't understand. By the time morning light started pressing against the curtains, my eyes felt gritty, and my patience was gone. I made coffee mostly on muscle memory, my thoughts circling around that noise. The house looked the same as always when I stepped out of my bedroom. Same hallway, same family photos, same faint smell of cleaning products and old wood. You don't expect something to be wrong when everything looks so normal. It wasn't until I went into the dining room that I saw it. Right in the center of the ceiling, just off to the left of the chandelier, was a pale, damp circle the size of a small plate. The cream paint looked darker there, swollen and discolored like bruised skin. I stopped mid-step, my stomach dropping. "No," I said out loud to no one. "You have got to be kidding me." I moved closer, tilting my head back. Another drop formed, fat and clear, at the lowest point of that sagging patch. I watched it grow, hang there for a second, then let go. Plink. It landed on the dining table, right on the polished wood. Another followed, slower this time, like it was dragging itself into existence. I shuffled back into the kitchen to grab a bowl and slid it under the drip, the porcelain ringing softly when it touched the tabletop. I just stood there for a long moment, mug in one hand, the other resting on the back of a chair, staring up at the ceiling. We had that bathroom redone 2 years ago. New fixtures, new pipes, new tiles. I picked myself after wandering around a showroom for 3 hours. Caleb handled most of it, talking to the contractors, signing the papers. I remember him saying, "Don't worry about the details, Mom. I've got it." It was supposed to be one part of the house I didn't have to worry about anymore. So why was my ceiling dripping now? I sighed, set my coffee down, and reached for my phone. My first instinct was the same as always. I called Caleb. He picked up on the 4th ring, his voice already tight before he even said hello. "Yeah. Caleb, it's me." "I figured," he said. In the background, I could hear something metallic, a low engine, men's voices. "What's wrong? I'm kind of in the middle of something." I glanced up at the ceiling again as another drop fell into the bowl. "There's a leak," I said. "In the dining room ceiling, it's dripping. I think it's from the upstairs bathroom." He swore under his breath, not quite covering the receiver in time. "You're sure it's a leak? Maybe it's just condensation or something." "Condensation doesn't create a growing brown spot on my ceiling," I snapped before I could stop myself. I softened my tone. "It's wet, Caleb, I can see it. I heard it all night." There was a brief silence on his end, just the sound of wind and distant machinery. "Fine," he said. "Call a plumber." "I was thinking," I went on, "since the bathroom was just renovated, maybe we should call the same company. It might still be under some kind of warranty. They'd know the setup, the materials. It would probably be cheaper, too." "No," he said immediately, too fast. I frowned. "No." He stopped, inhaled sharply. "That company was a pain to deal with, Mom. They cut corners, took forever. I don't want them back in the house." "That's not what you said at the time," I replied carefully. I remembered him shaking hands with the foreman, telling him they'd done a solid job, and that he'd recommend them. "Well, my opinion's changed," he said, irritation bleeding through now. Look, I don't have time for this, just don't call them, okay? I'll text you a number. New plumber, guy's good, use him. Can't we at least? Mom, he cut in, voice edged and sharp. I said I'll send you a number. Call him. I'm on a site with 20 guys waiting on concrete. I can't talk about a drip right now. The word drip made me feel suddenly small, ridiculous, like I was making a fuss over nothing. Okay, I said quietly. Just send me the number. He hung up without a goodbye. I stared at the phone for a second, then at the ceiling. Another drop slid down, fell neatly into the bowl with a soft, accusing sound. The reaction sat wrong in my chest, like I'd swallowed something that hadn't gone down the right way. Why was he so adamant about not calling the original company? If they'd done such a terrible job, why hadn't he said anything before? And why did it feel like I'd stepped on a landmine just by mentioning the word warranty? A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text. Caleb, call this guy, Dennis Ward, good plumber, tell him I sent you. He'd added a number under it. No explanation, no apology. I dialed before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang only once. Dennis Ward, a man's voice answered. Calm, steady, the kind of tone people use when they're used to fixing problems instead of causing them. Mr. Ward, hello, my name is Joan Ellis, I said. My son Caleb gave me your number. We have a leak in our dining room ceiling. I think it's coming from the upstairs bathroom. Okay, Mrs. Ellis, he said. I could almost hear him mentally reaching for a notepad. How bad is it? Is the ceiling sagging, fast drip, or slow? Slow, I said. I glanced at the bowl. A few clear drops pooled at the bottom. But there's a damp spot. The paint looks swollen. Got it. Anyone using the bathroom right now? No. Good, don't run any water up there if you can help it, he said. I'm finishing up a job close by. I can be at your place in about an hour. That work for you? Relief loosened something in my shoulders I hadn't realized was tight. Yes, I said. That would be wonderful, thank you. He took my address, repeated it back, and told me again not to use the bathroom until he'd taken a look. When I hung up, the house felt less like it was holding a secret from me and more like it was waiting for help. I spent the next half hour moving things, as if rearranging furniture could somehow fix a hole in the ceiling. I pulled the dining table a few inches away from the drip and covered the surface with an old towel, just in case. I set another bowl nearby. I wiped the counters even though they didn't need it. I opened a window in the kitchen, letting in a thin stream of fresh air and neighborhood noise. Every couple of minutes, I found myself glancing up at the ceiling, watching the damp circle slowly widen, listening for each soft drop hitting porcelain. It felt personal somehow, like the house was quietly bleeding. When the doorbell finally rang, I nearly jumped. I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to the front door. On the porch stood a man in his 50s, maybe a little older. His hair was mostly gray with streaks of the dark color it used to be, cut short but not fussy. He wore worn blue overalls over a faded t-shirt and round glasses that framed kind eyes. In his right hand, he held a large, scuffed metal toolbox, the kind that looks like it has seen every kind of problem a house can throw at it. Mrs. Ellis, he asked. Yes, I said. You must be Mr. Ward. Dennis is fine, he replied with a small nod. You've got a leak giving you trouble. He stepped inside when I moved aside for him, his boots leaving faint marks on the entry mat. He smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something metallic, like cold tools. It's in the dining room, I said, leading the way. Started dripping last night. I heard it from upstairs. He walked under the wet patch, craning his neck to look up. One of the bowls was already half full. He watched a drop fall, eyes narrowing slightly, then shifted his weight and studied the position in relation to the upstairs bathroom. Bathroom is directly above this, he asked. Yes. He hummed under his breath, a thoughtful sound. All right, I'll need to see it. We went upstairs and I showed him the bathroom. It looked perfectly normal to me. Clean tiles, shiny faucet, everything in its place. He ran the water briefly, watching the pipes under the sink, feeling along the wall, checking seams and joints. Then he shut the water off again and wiped his hands on a rag he'd pulled from his pocket. "Everything up here looks fine at first glance," he said. "No obvious leaks. I'd like to take a look at your basement if you don't mind. Sometimes the problem's easier to trace from below." "The basement," I repeated. Nothing about a drip in the ceiling made me think of the basement, but then again, I'm not a plumber. "Of course, it's down this way." I led him back downstairs and opened the door to the basement, flicking on the light. The bulb at the top of the stairs buzzed faintly. The steps creaked in their familiar way as he started down. "You don't need to come down," he said, glancing back at me over his shoulder. "Might take me a little while to poke around. I'll holler if I need you." "All right," I said, feeling oddly like I was handing the underbelly of my house over to him. "I'll be in the kitchen." He nodded and disappeared into the shadows below, his footsteps fading. After a moment, I heard the scrape of his toolbox being set down, the metallic clink of tools, the soft thud of him moving things around. I went back to the kitchen and picked up my mug, now lukewarm. From where I stood, I could still see the bowl on the dining table catching each lazy drop. Through the floor, faint but clear, the sounds of his work floated up. A wrench turning, something metal tapping against a pipe, the rustle of boxes shifting. The noises were oddly comforting, like a heartbeat returning to a body that had been too still. In my mind, it was simple: a loose pipe, a worn-out joint, something minor the renovation company missed. A competent professional was down there with his sturdy toolbox, fixing it. For the moment, I let myself believe that this was all it was. Just a leak. Just a problem with an easy explanation, waiting quietly in the dark to be repaired. Time does strange things when you're waiting for someone else to solve your problem. I drifted between the kitchen and the dining room, mug in hand, listening to the house like it was trying to tell me a secret. Every few minutes, a drop still fell from the ceiling into the bowl on the table. Plink, then silence, then another. Slow enough that it was annoying, not urgent. Slow enough that if you didn't know better, you could convince yourself it wasn't worth worrying about. Under my feet, Dennis made the kinds of sounds that meant competent man working. Metal clinking, something being dragged a few inches, the hollow ring of a pipe being tapped. It was oddly comforting, like background noise in an old movie. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped both hands around my coffee like I could squeeze warmth and calm out of it. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I kept sipping anyway. My eyes kept drifting to the ceiling, to that wet circle spreading like a stain on a photograph. My thoughts, as they usually did, slid upstairs to Riley. If I listened past the faint noises from the basement, the house above me was quiet. Too quiet for this time of morning. When she was little, I used to hear her feet pounding down the hallway at 7 a.m., door slamming, bathroom fan roaring, music leaking under her door while she got ready for school. Now, half the time, I wasn't even sure she'd slept at all. Her door had still been closed when I walked past earlier. No light under the crack this time. Maybe she'd finally managed to rest. Or maybe she was just lying there, staring at the ceiling the way I do at 3 in the morning. In the last 6 months since she left Mark Henson, she seemed to shrink into herself a little more each day. She'd lost weight without trying. Her jeans hung just a bit too loose at the waist. Her favorite sweater sleeves slipped over her hands now. No matter how much makeup she put on, there were always faint purple half-moons under her eyes, like bruises made of exhaustion. I'd tried asking, so many times. "Riley, are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom. I just forget sometimes." "Did you sleep at all last night? You look exhausted." "I'm fine. I just need time to heal." "Do you want to talk about Mark?" "No, I'm fine, really." Those 2 words had become her shield. I'm fine. She said them flat, like it was a line she'd rehearsed. Every time she said them, it felt like she moved one more step away from me, even while living in the next room. I worried about her constantly, even while doing mundane things like wiping the counters or folding towels. I worried about the weight she was losing, about the way she flinched when her phone buzzed, about how she'd stare at the TV without really seeing it. I worried that one day I'd knock on her door and she wouldn't answer, not because she was asleep, but because something inside her had finally gone dark and quiet. Compared to that, a little water in the ceiling felt stupid. Another drop fell into the bowl. Plink. I set my mug down and rubbed my fingers over my temples. I'd had a dull headache all morning. Not a sharp pain, just that tight, squeezing band across my forehead that made everything feel heavier. Lately, I'd been waking up tired, staying tired, going to bed tired. I blamed it on age, on grief that had never really settled, on stress about the kids. It never occurred to me to blame the house. Time kept stretching. 10 minutes became 20. 20 blurred into 40. I got up, rinsed a plate that didn't really need rinsing, wiped a perfectly clean counter, then sat back down again. The sounds from the basement continued, but slowly grew less frequent. More pauses, longer silences. By the time almost an hour had passed, my nerves were buzzing. I was just reaching for my phone to check the time when I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. They were slower than before, heavy, like each step needed to be considered first. The basement door opened with a soft creak, and Dennis stepped into the hallway. At first glance, nothing obvious had changed. Same overalls, same glasses, same toolbox in one hand. But his face was different. He looked paler, like someone had turned down the color there too. The lines around his mouth were deeper, and his lips were pressed into a flat line. His eyes found mine and held them, and for the first time since he'd arrived, I saw something I hadn't expected from a plumber. Worry, real worry. Did you find the problem? I asked, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. He swallowed once. The hand holding the toolbox wasn't steady. I could see the faint tremble in his fingers. Mrs. Ellis, he said quietly, could we sit down for a minute? Every muscle in my body tightened. Sit down. People only say that when something is wrong. The leak, I said, my voice too bright in my own ears. It's the pipes, isn't it? Something with the renovation. I told Caleb we should have called the original company, but It's not exactly a leak, he said. Just like that, my words shut off. The room stretched wide and empty around that sentence. I stared at him. What do you mean, not exactly a leak? My ceiling is dripping. He glanced toward the dining room, then back at me. His eyes softened a little. Please, he said. Let's sit. This isn't a conversation I want you to have standing in a doorway. My heartbeat picked up, thudding against my ribs. I nodded, numb, and led the way to the small table by the kitchen window. We sat across from each other, the sunlight catching the gray in his hair, turning it almost silver. Up close, the tremor in his hands was more obvious. He set the toolbox on the floor, like he needed to free himself from the weight of it, then folded his hands together on the table to keep them still. Mrs. Ellis, he began, do you live here alone? The question threw me. Of all the things I expected him to ask, that wasn't on the list. No, I said slowly. My children live here. My son Caleb and my daughter Riley. You saw her earlier, I think, when you came in. He nodded once. Right, the young woman in the pajamas. She's 38, I said a little defensively. I don't know why that mattered. They both live here, this is their home. And do they have access to the basement? He asked. His tone was careful now, too careful, like he was trying not to step on broken glass. I frowned. Of course they do, it's just the basement. Laundry room storage, we've never locked it or anything if that's what you mean. I gave a small, nervous laugh. It's their house too. He didn't laugh with me. Do you go down there often? He asked. Not as much as I used to, I admitted. My knees don't like the stairs. I tried to lighten it. But I do the laundry, store holiday decorations, that kind of thing. I'm not afraid of it if that's what you're asking. He inhaled through his nose, slow and steady, like he was trying to prepare himself. I'm going to ask you something else now, he said, and I want you to really think about your answer before you give it to me, okay? The room suddenly felt smaller. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder. All right, I said. Have you been feeling unwell lately? He asked. More tired than usual, headaches, trouble sleeping, shortness of breath, anything like that. I blinked, of all the questions. I'm 68, Mr. Ward, I said automatically. Feeling tired comes with the territory. His gaze didn't waver. That may be, he said gently, but I still need you to answer. I looked down at my hands. My knuckles looked thinner than they used to, the veins more visible. I started, then paused. I've been more tired, yes, especially the last few months. Some days it feels like I'm walking through water. I wake up tired and go to bed tired. I just figured it's my age or the stress. I live with 2 grown children, after all. I tried to smile. It didn't quite land. Headaches? He asked. Yes, I admitted. More often than I used to. A sort of dull pressure behind my eyes. I thought it was my glasses, or maybe I needed to drink more water. Any trouble sleeping? I hesitated. Sometimes. I wake up a lot during the night, but I thought that was just, worry. About the kids, about money, about everything. He nodded. And your children, Caleb and Riley, do they have any of these symptoms, as far as you know? I thought about Caleb coming home tired and immediately reaching for a beer, but that was an exhaustion of a different kind. His movements were heavy, but his eyes were clear. Riley looked like hell emotionally, but physically, she didn't complain about headaches or dizziness. If anything, she seemed wired on nerves half the time. No, I said slowly. Not that they've told me. Riley doesn't talk much, but she doesn't seem sick, just sad. Caleb's always tired from work, but he's strong as an ox. Why are you asking me this? Dennis looked down at his hands for a moment, then up at me again. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Because, he said, what I found in your basement is not something I can explain as bad plumbing or old pipes. It's something else. My mouth went dry. What do you mean, something else? He took a breath, choosing his words like each one mattered. There is a setup down there, he said. A system. It's connected into your existing lines, but it's not part of any standard plumbing or ventilation I've ever seen in a home. A strange, floating feeling rose in my chest. A system, I repeated. Like what? Some kind of old heating thing? The house is pretty old. No, he said, more firmly this time. This is new, newer than the house by a long shot. Wiring, tubing, components that someone put in intentionally. He paused, watching my face. Someone who knows this house well, who had time to work down there without being disturbed. I shook my head automatically. No, that doesn't make sense. We don't have anything like that. Just the furnace, the water heater, the laundry. I'm telling you what I saw, he said. Thin plastic tubes woven around your existing ducts. A metal unit that looks like a control box. Connections to your ventilation lines. I could feel my heart beating all the way up in my throat now. Ventilation lines, I asked. You mean the air? Yes. He leaned in a little, lowering his voice even though we were alone. Mrs. Ellis, I've worked in a lot of houses. I've seen DIY disasters, rats chewing through pipes, black mold, you name it. I've never seen a setup like the one in your basement that didn't serve a very specific, very deliberate purpose. My fingers tightened around the mug until my knuckles ached. And what purpose is that? I whispered. He didn't answer right away. His eyes searched my face, as if trying to gauge how much truth I could take at once. I don't want to jump to conclusions, he said slowly. Not without showing you, but I will say this, that system is not there by accident. Somebody installed it. Pieces were measured and cut to fit your house. It's been integrated into your vents in a way that suggests planning, not improvisation. I shook my head again, more violently this time, like I could rattle his words loose. No, I said. You must be mistaken. Maybe it's something from the old owners. Maybe the renovation company. It's not that old, he cut in. I can tell from the condition of the materials, and any legitimate contractor would have logged something like that in their plans. This isn't standard. It's hidden, tucked behind existing structures where you'd never go unless you were looking for it. The room tilted, just a little. I reached for the edge of the table, grounding myself. You're scaring me, I said softly. I know, he replied. His expression was pained. And I hate that I am, but what scares me more is the idea of you not knowing. I swallowed, my throat tight. So what are you saying? That someone came into my house and installed some kind of machine in my basement. For what? Why? He hesitated, then asked one more question, almost gently. How long have you been feeling off? He asked. Tired, headaches, the sleep problems, if you had to guess. I thought back, past the last bad week, the one before, further. The months blurred together, but there was a general sense of recent that seemed to stretch further and further when I poked at it. I don't know, I said weakly. 6 months, maybe more. Time gets strange when every day looks the same. He nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. Mrs. Ellis, he said quietly, I think you should come down and see what I found, with your own eyes. I can explain more clearly if you're looking at it too. I stared at him, wanting desperately to say no. To tell him to pack up his toolbox, patch the leak, send a bill, and leave my life exactly as it had been that morning. Boring, colorless, predictable. Instead, I heard my own voice, small and thin, saying, You really think I need to see it? Yes, he said, no hesitation this time. I don't expect you to take my word for any of this, but once you see it, I don't think you'll be able to pretend it's just a leak anymore. The kitchen felt suddenly colder, the air heavier in my lungs. I pushed my chair back, my legs unsteady as I stood. Fine, I said, though nothing felt fine at all. Show me. He got up too, slower than before, like the knowledge of what he'd seen weighed him down. Without another word, he walked to the basement door and opened it. The stairs yawned below us, the light switch waiting. For the first time in all the years I'd lived in that house, I hesitated at the top. The light switch felt colder than it should have. My fingers hovered over it for a second before I finally flipped it down. The single bulb at the top of the stairs flickered once, then steadied, casting its usual weak, yellow cone over the wooden steps. I've walked down to that basement 1,000 times. For Christmas decorations, for paint cans, for laundry, for boxes of old-school projects I could never bring myself to throw away. I know exactly how many steps there are, exactly which one creaks the loudest. But standing at the top with Dennis beside me, the air felt different, thicker, as if the house was holding its breath. Careful, he said quietly. Take your time. I put my hand on the railing and started down. The first step groaned under my weight. A familiar sound, but today it echoed in a way that made my skin prickle. The air grew cooler as I descended, and the dry, dusty smell of upstairs shifted into the damp, earthy scent of concrete, old wood, and time. I counted the steps automatically. 1, 2, 3, by 8, the light from the kitchen above was just a dim rectangle, far away. The bulb overhead cast long shadows down the walls, turning the simple wooden planks into something almost skeletal. At the bottom, the cement floor felt solid and cold under my slippers. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Up close, nothing looked different. The washer and dryer sat where they always had, a little rust around the edges, a basket of clean towels folded neatly on top. Cardboard boxes were stacked along one wall, each labeled in my handwriting. Christmas, Halloween, old photos, Riley College, Caleb's school stuff. A metal shelving unit held gardening supplies, bags of potting soil, flower pots, a cracked green watering can. A spider web hung in one corner, glinting faintly in the light. It was the same cluttered basement I'd known for decades. Ordinary, harmless. This way, Dennis said. He'd brought a flashlight with him this time. He clicked it on, its beam cutting through the dimness with a sharp white circle. The overhead bulb didn't quite reach the far corner where the furnace and water heater stood, hulking and silent like sleeping animals. We walked past the washer and dryer, the smell of detergent mixing with the colder scent of metal and dust. The concrete under my feet felt slightly uneven, the faint grit of dirt shifting as I stepped. I could hear the steady thump of my own heart in my ears. The furnace stood ahead of us, a big metal box taller than I am, with pipes and ducts stretching out from it into the ceiling like branches of a strange, silver tree. I've always hated going back there. It's cramped, the lighting is poor, and there's something about the narrow space that makes me feel like the walls are quietly leaning in. Dennis angled the flashlight toward a narrow gap between the furnace and the far wall. It's back here, he said. You don't usually come behind this, I'm guessing. No, I said quietly. Why would I? He didn't answer. He eased his toolbox aside, then turned sideways to slip into the space behind the furnace. I followed more slowly, one hand brushing the cool metal as I squeezed through. It smelled different back there. Less like a basement, more like something chemical and stale, riding underneath the usual dust and metal scent. Watch your step, Dennis murmured. We came to a stop in a cramped pocket of space behind the furnace, where the overhead light didn't reach. The concrete wall rose up in front of us, lined with pipes and ductwork I'd never bothered to understand. Then Dennis lifted the flashlight. For a second, my brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. Thin, translucent plastic tubes ran across the wall and ceiling in a complicated weaving pattern, snaking around the existing pipes like vines around tree branches. They were narrower than normal plumbing lines, more like the tubes you see in hospitals, the kind they hook up to IV bags. They glistened faintly in the flashlight's beam. In the middle of it all, mounted on a metal bracket, was a box about the size of a toaster. It was matte gray, with a narrow seam around the side and small compartments built into its front. In those compartments sat 3 narrow containers, each filled with a different colored liquid. One was a pale yellow, one a cloudy white, and one a faint, sickly green. On the side of the box, 2 small digital displays glowed an eerie red in the dark. Numbers blinked slowly on each one, changing with soft, mechanical precision. The flashlight beam made the red light bleed into the surrounding metal, like a wound. My mouth went dry. "What is that?" I whispered. Dennis didn't answer right away. He moved the beam along one of the thin tubes, following it as it disappeared into one of the larger silver ducts that carried air through the house. "Listen carefully, Mrs. Ellis," he said at last. His voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "These thin tubes here," he explained, tapping one lightly with his knuckle, "they're not part of your original system. I've seen your main lines, your drains, your vents. These are different. They've been added on. They run from this box, which is some kind of distribution unit, into your ventilation ducts." "Ventilation," I repeated numbly. "You mean the air that goes through the house?" "That's right." He shifted the beam to where a tube connected to a round duct overhead. Airflow passes through these ducts, picks up whatever is being fed into it through these tubes, and carries it up into the rooms. I stared at the box, the tubes, the liquids. They might as well have been written in another language. "I don't understand," I said. "What is being fed into it? What are those liquids?" He hesitated, then said carefully, "I can't tell you the exact chemical composition without lab testing. I'm not a chemist, but I've seen setups like this described before. Online, in training materials, in a case a friend of mine told me about from years back." He swallowed. The flashlight trembled just enough for me to see it. "This kind of system," he went on, "is usually used to introduce substances into a closed air environment over time. Slowly, consistently." "Substances," I said, my voice sounding far away in my own ears. "What kind of substances?" "In some cases, perfumes, scented oils, industrial cleaning agents," he said. "In other cases," he paused, "in other cases, chemicals that can make someone sick without them realizing why." The concrete felt like it shifted beneath my feet. "Sick," I repeated. He nodded grimly. "Chronic exposure, in small amounts, enough to cause fatigue, headaches, sleep problems, long-term organ damage in some scenarios. It's the kind of thing that could be written off as age, stress, a bad heart, early dementia. Depends on what's being used." "That's not," I began, then stopped. "That can't be. Why would anyone?" The words tangled in my throat and died there. Dennis moved the flashlight again, showing where residue had crusted faintly around one of the tube connections, a chalky ring against the plastic. "This unit is feeding something into your airflow," he said. "And from what I can tell based on the direction of these ducts and the way your system is laid out, the strongest output is directed toward one particular branch." "Which branch?" I asked, even though some part of me already knew. He looked at me, then up at the ceiling. "The one that leads to your bedroom," he said softly. The sound in my ears turned into a roar, like distant ocean waves. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I grabbed the edge of the furnace with one hand to steady myself, the cold metal biting into my palm. "No," I whispered. "No, that doesn't make sense. Why would anything be aimed at my—" "Here," he said gently. "Touch this." He shifted the flashlight to one of the tubes running out of the box and into the duct. It was clear, with a faint, nearly invisible film clinging to the inside. "I don't want to." "Please," he insisted, still gentle but firm. "Just with your fingertips, I want you to feel it." My hand shook as I reached out. My fingers brushed the plastic. It was warm. Not room temperature warm, not just sitting in a basement warm. There was a subtle, pulsing warmth to it, like a tiny body heat, alive, active. "It's on," he said quietly. "Right now, there's something moving through it, slowly, but it's moving." I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, wiping my fingers on my jeans even though there was nothing visible on them. "How long?" I managed. "How long has whatever this is been going on?" He angled the flashlight toward the box again, this time focusing on a small panel near the side where a thin layer of dust had settled. Judging by the dust buildup on the surfaces that aren't hot, the slight corrosion on that metal connector there, the discoloration on that clampy, I'd estimate 8 to 9 months, he said. Maybe a little more, but not years. Less than a year. 8 to 9 months. My mind flipped back, sorting through seasons like flipping a calendar. 8 to 9 months ago, it was late last year. Around the time the holidays started creeping up. Around the time I started waking up tired and blaming the shorter days. Around the time I found myself standing at the sink, rubbing at my temples more often. Telling myself I was just stressed. "I've been feeling off for about that long," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "Maybe a little more, I thought it was." I let out a breathless laugh that sounded almost hysterical. "I thought it was getting older. I joked about it with Caleb. I told him my warranty was running out." Dennis didn't smile. "This system doesn't install itself, Mrs. Ellis," he said. "Someone put it here. They had to know your house. They had to know where the vents run, which duct leads where. That takes time, planning, access." Access. My mind, traitor that it is, offered up images whether I wanted them or not. The bathroom renovation, weeks of workers in the house, pipes exposed, walls open. Caleb following the foreman around, talking quietly with him in the hallway. Me bringing them coffee, snacks, feeling grateful to have something modernized in the house. "Don't worry about all this, Mom," Caleb had said, waving at the tangled guts of the house that used to be hidden behind drywall. "It's just boring technical stuff. They know what they're doing." I had believed him. Then Riley in college, talking with bright eyes about her chemistry classes. "It's so cool, Mom, the way you can combine things and get these reactions. You can design how something behaves over time. It's like controlled magic." I heard her voice say controlled again, and my stomach lurched. "No," I said, shaking my head hard enough to make the basement swim for a second. "No, that's ridiculous. You're talking like someone did this on purpose. Like they built some kind of poisoning machine in my basement." The words sounded insane even as I said them. Why would anyone do that? Why would anyone do that to me? Dennis turned the flashlight away from the device for a moment so he could look me directly in the face. In the dim light, his eyes were steady and unbearably kind. "I don't know the why," he said softly. "Not yet. I can guess, money, anger, control. But I can't tell you that part for sure. What I can tell you is the what." He shifted the beam back to the tubes, the box, the blinking red numbers. "This is deliberate," he said. Each word landed like a hammer. "This is intentional. This is built in a way that suggests someone knew your routines, your habits, your house. They had plenty of time down here alone to install it. They chose a method that would make someone sick slowly, very slowly, the kind of sick that could be written off as age or bad luck." I felt bile rise in my throat. I swallowed it back down, my hand pressing against my chest as if I could physically hold myself together. "Someone who lives here," I whispered. You think one of my children," my voice broke. I shook my head violently. No, they would never. Caleb works himself half to death to help me. Riley is broken, but she is not, she would. "I'm not telling you who did it," Dennis said quietly. "I don't know that yet. Maybe it was someone from the renovation crew. Maybe someone else with access. Maybe more than one person. That's for investigators to figure out." He took a breath, his shoulders rising and falling slowly. "But this setup," he continued, his voice calm and steady in a way mine could never be in that moment, "was not an accident. It's not old equipment. It's not some weird previous system from the 70s. It's new, it's active, it's aimed at your room." He paused, letting those facts hang in the damp air between us. "Someone in this house wants to harm you, Mrs. Ellis." The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. "No," I said immediately, the word tearing itself out of me like something wounded. "No, you don't understand. Caleb and Riley are all I have. I raised them. I nursed them when they had fevers. I held them when they cried. They stayed with me after their father died. They would never." He didn't argue. He just let me speak, my denial crashing against something solid and immovable. "I don't expect you to accept it right now," he said gently, when I finally ran out of words. "But I can't lie to you. What's down here is real. It's doing something to the air you breathe. And until we know exactly what and exactly who's behind it, you need to understand one thing." His voice dropped even softer, but the words were crystal clear. "You are not safe in your own home." My first thought was that he had to be wrong. Not just mistaken, but completely, impossibly wrong, like he'd walked into the wrong house, the wrong basement, the wrong life. "You don't understand," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, thin and sharp at the same time. "Caleb and Riley, they're my kids. They're all I have. They would never hurt me." Dennis didn't flinch. The flashlight beam stayed steady on that ugly little box and its blinking red numbers. "I hear you," he said quietly, "but I need you to hear me too." "I raised them," I went on as if he hadn't spoken. Words were the only thing standing between me and the terrifying silence behind them. "I stayed up all night when they had fevers. I worked extra shifts when they needed school supplies. I helped Riley fill out college applications. I co-signed the loan for Caleb's first truck. They were here when their father died. They held me up when I couldn't stand on my own. They love me." "I don't doubt you love them," he said. "I'm not questioning that." His tone stayed maddeningly calm. "But love doesn't change the way this system works or what it's designed to do." My legs suddenly felt wrong, like they weren't attached right. I pressed my free hand against the concrete wall to steady myself. The surface felt cold and slightly damp under my palm. "I'm telling you," I insisted, "there has to be some other explanation. Maybe it's some old thing from the previous owner. Maybe the renovation guys." He shifted the beam to the digital displays. Red numbers blinked in small, precise increments, counting in seconds and minutes, slotted next to smaller indicators I didn't understand. "Timers," he said. "Programmed intervals. One controls when the system turns on and off, the other controls flow rate. This isn't some forgotten relic from the 70s. It's modern. It's active. Someone set it up intentionally." I swallowed. The concrete under my feet felt like it was tilting. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely more than breath. "Why would anyone who would even know how to?" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't want to hear the names my own mind was offering me. Dennis exhaled slowly. "I checked the programming," he said. "It's running on a cycle. Lower doses at night, higher in the morning and early afternoon. The timing lines up with when you're most likely to be in your room and in the main part of the house." He let that sink in for a second. "If this keeps running," he continued, "you'll get sicker. Slowly, you already are, eventually. Your body won't be able to compensate anymore." My hand slipped a fraction on the wall. I grabbed harder, my fingers scrabbling for purchase. "How long?" I asked. The words scraped on the way out. "If I just stayed here, if nobody touched it, how long?" He hesitated. then answered like he owed me the truth, even if it hurt. Based on the settings and the wear on those parts, I'd say this has been active 8, maybe 9 months already, he said. If it keeps going at the current pace, a few more months could push your body past a point where it can bounce back, a little faster if they increase the flow. A low, rushing sound filled my ears. For a second, I genuinely thought the basement was flooding. Then I realized it was just my heartbeat, hammering too loud. So you're saying, I managed, that if you hadn't come today because my ceiling decided to drip, I'd just keep getting more tired and more forgetful and more sick, until one day I couldn't say the word. Until you died, he finished quietly. And everyone would say it was natural. Age, weak heart, maybe dementia. They'd shake their heads and talk about how you went downhill this past year. Dizziness washed over me in a hot wave. I stumbled a step away from the furnace, my knees almost buckling. The only reason I didn't end up on the floor was because my hand was still clamped to the wall like a claw. Easy, Dennis said quickly. He moved closer but didn't touch me, like he knew if he did, I might break. Breathe, Mrs. Ellis, in through your nose, out through your mouth, slowly. I dragged in air that suddenly felt too heavy. The basement smelled like concrete, dust, and something chemical that I now realized had been there the whole time. I just hadn't named it. This doesn't make sense, I whispered. It doesn't make any sense. He gave me a moment, then spoke again, each word measured. I understand that your mind is going to fight this, he said. That's normal. You love your kids, you trust them. That's what decent parents do. But I need you to separate what you feel from what we can see. He pointed with the flashlight. What we can see is a device that someone installed in your basement, hidden behind your furnace, connected deliberately to your ventilation system, calibrated to target your bedroom more than any other room. It's been running for months. It's making you sick. And it's designed to keep doing that until you're dead. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw Christmas dinner last year. Caleb smiling faintly as he carved the turkey. Riley kissing my cheek for a photo. The three of us standing in front of the tree while the camera timer blinked. Were they already doing this to me then? My stomach lurched. I thought I might be sick right there behind the furnace. There is no innocent explanation for this setup, Dennis said softly. None. Nobody accidentally builds something like this. Nobody does this to test the air. Nobody does this for a good reason. I opened my eyes again. The red numbers on the timers blinked steadily, uncaring. Okay, I whispered. Okay, let's say you're right. Let's say this is intentional. What do I do? Call Caleb, call Riley, ask them what they've been doing in the basement. Tell them I know about this thing and then what? Watch them laugh in my face. First thing you do, he said immediately, is leave. Leave, I repeated. The word felt wrong in my mouth. Leave where? Out of this house, he said. Away from this system, away from whoever installed it. We can talk about where after you're not breathing this air. I stared at him. You want me to just walk out of my house? Yes, he said. Today, now. A bitter little laugh slipped out of me. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, he said. It's necessary. This is my home, I shot back, the word home coming out sharper than I expected. I've lived here for 40 years. I brought my Bobbies back from the hospital to this house. I painted those walls after my husband died so I wouldn't fall apart. This is where he took his last breath. This place is all I have left of the life we built. My throat tightened. I can't just walk out the door like I'm going to the grocery store and not come back. His expression softened, but his voice didn't lose its firmness. I'm not saying you never come back, he said. I'm saying you don't stay here while someone is turning your house into a slow weapon. I'm saying you don't sit in your own living room while a system you saw with your own eyes continues to pump God knows what into your lungs. I gripped the wall harder. Ideas collided in my head, none of them landing. I need to talk to them, I insisted. To Caleb, to Riley. There has to be some explanation. Maybe they were trying to, I don't know, fix something, maybe someone else. Mrs. Ellis, he cut in gently, if you confront them right now, before we understand exactly what we're dealing with, what do you honestly think is going to happen? I don't know, I snapped. Maybe they'll tell me the truth. Or maybe, he said, not raising his voice, they'll realize you know. And if they've already been willing to poison you slowly for months, what do you think they might do if they feel cornered? The basement seemed to contract around us. The flashlight suddenly felt like the only thing holding back the dark. They could turn up the dosage, he went on, his tone calm but implacable. They could switch to something faster. They could claim you're confused and get you alone somewhere for your own good. They could stage a fall, an accident, a gas leak. I don't know. What I do know is that they would no longer have a reason to be patient if they thought you found them out. The image hit me. Caleb at the top of the stairs, looking down with that flat, tired expression. Riley in the doorway, arms folded, eyes too bright. The idea of them planning my death the way other people plan a vacation made my stomach twist. "This is insane," I whispered. "What's insane?" Dennis said quietly, "is staying inside a house where there is active, deliberate harm programmed into the walls because you're afraid to upset the people who might have done it." I winced. He wasn't cruel, but the truth still hurt. "So what then?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I walk upstairs, I grab my purse, and I just disappear. Don't tell them anything. Don't say where I'm going." "For now," he said, "yes." "I can't do that," I said immediately. "What am I supposed to tell them later? They'll be worried. They'll call. Good, he said. "Let them call. Let their reaction be part of what helps us understand who we're dealing with. Right now, you talk to them, you show your cards. You leave without details, you keep a piece of safety for yourself." I pressed my lips together so hard they hurt. The house above us suddenly felt very large and very full of listening. "I feel like a criminal," I murmured, "sneaking out of my own home." "You're not the criminal here," he replied. "You're the target." The word hung in the air. Target. I closed my eyes again. I saw my husband standing under the apple tree in the backyard, waving a trowel at me, dirt on his knees. I saw Caleb at 8, kneeling on this very basement floor, begging me to let him keep a stray cat he'd found. I saw Riley at 15, sitting on the basement steps, crying over a failed test, my hand on her shoulder. "This house is the only place I've ever felt completely safe," I whispered. He let a beat pass. "And I'm telling you," he answered softly, "it isn't safe anymore. Not until someone dismantles that," he nodded toward the device, "and figures out who put it here and why." Silence stretched between us. The red numbers kept blinking, indifferent to my crisis. "How long?" I asked finally. If I leave, how long?" He seemed to know what I meant. "Pack a bag for a few days," he said. "Maybe a week. Enough time to get you out of danger while we figure out next steps. This doesn't have to be forever, but staying here and pretending you didn't see any of this," he shook his head. "That's not an option." My feet felt heavy as we squeezed back out from behind the furnace. The open space of the basement felt foreign now, like I was seeing it for the first time since the house had shifted into something else. We climbed the stairs slowly. Each creak felt louder, sharper. At the top, the brighter light of the kitchen made my eyes sting. Dennis closed the basement door gently behind us, as if he didn't want the thing below to know we'd left. "Here, what I need you to do," he said. "Today, right now." I turned to him, still holding onto the doorframe as if I might float away without it. "Within the next hour," he said, "I want you to gather the essentials, identification, any important documents you have easy access to, bank information, a change of clothes or two, necessary medications if you take any, nothing that looks like you're moving out forever, just enough for a few days away." My mind jumped feebly from one thing to another. "My will," I said. "The house deed, insurance papers, they're in the safe in my bedroom." "Good," he said. "Take what you can carry without drawing attention. If anyone asks, you're running errands, banks, paperwork, something boring. Do not tell them you're leaving. Do not tell them where you're going. Not yet." I put a hand to my chest. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break a rib. "This feels wrong," I whispered. "What feels wrong?" he said softly. "Is that someone has been poisoning you in your sleep. What you're doing now is survival." His words lodged in me like a splinter. From where I stood, I could see the bottom of the staircase that led to the second floor. The carpet there was a little worn in the middle, from years of feet traveling up and down. At the top of those stairs was the hallway. On the right, my bedroom. On the left, Riley's. Her door would be closed right now. Maybe she was still sleeping. Maybe she was scrolling through her phone, eyes blank. Maybe she was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a life that had come apart in her hands. I stared up at that stairwell until my eyes blurred. The idea of walking out of this house without telling her, without going to her door and knocking, without saying, "I know something terrible and I need you to tell me it isn't true," felt like betrayal. But the memory of the warm plastic tube under my fingers was stronger. "Just for a short time," I said finally. The words tasted like defeat and confession all at once. "I'll leave just for a short time, to think." Dennis nodded once. "That's enough for now." I drew in a shaky breath, wiped at my eyes with the heel of my hand, and forced myself to take the first step toward the stairs. With every step up, the house felt heavier on my shoulders, like it knew I was about to break a promise I never thought I'd have to make. For the first time in 40 years, I was getting ready to run away from my own home. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until I tried to grip the bedroom doorknob. The metal felt slick under my fingers, like it was covered in something invisible. I held on a second too long, breathing in slowly, counting to 3 the way I used to when the kids were toddlers, and everything in the house could be fixed with a snack and a nap. Then I opened the door. My bedroom looked exactly the same as it had that morning, which somehow made everything worse. The bed was neatly made, the floral comforter smoothed flat. The curtains were half open, letting in soft daylight. My slippers sat by the foot of the bed, toes pointed toward each other, like they'd been caught mid-conversation. Nothing here knew that the air had been trying to kill me. I walked to the corner where the small safe was tucked into the back of the closet. The carpet muffled my steps. The closet smelled faintly of old perfume and cedar, little glass bottles, dresses I rarely wore, my husband's jacket still hanging there like he might come back for it. I knelt down carefully in front of the safe, my knees protesting. The keypad buttons were slightly worn in the middle from years of use. My fingers hovered over them for a second. The code came back like muscle memory. 4192. Our wedding anniversary. I'd chosen it because I thought I'd never forget it. Now it felt like a door I was opening into another life. The lock clicked. The door swung inward with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, everything was where it always was. A small stack of crisp envelopes. A folder with plastic sleeves filled with papers. An old jewelry box that had belonged to my mother, scuffed at the edges. My throat tightened. First, my will. I pulled it out carefully, the paper smooth and heavier than normal in my hands. I remembered sitting at the lawyer's office years ago, staring at the paragraphs that spelled out who would get what if I died. I'd written their names in ink: Caleb Ellis, Riley Ellis, the 2 people I trusted most in the world. I hesitated, then tucked it into my bag. Next, the deed to the house. The document felt almost sacred, stamped and signed, proof of 40 years of mortgage payments, repainting, fixing, living. Proof that this house belonged to me. Or at least that's what I used to think. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Insurance policy, life insurance paperwork, home insurance. All the things people talk about in serious voices and file away, just in case. I slid them out of their plastic sleeves and stacked them neatly. Then bank information. Checkbook, account statements, a small notebook where I'd written down numbers and reminders in my own handwriting. My financial life, condensed into a few items that suddenly seemed both essential and fragile. It felt wrong to take them. It felt even more wrong to leave them here. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff, and crossed to the dresser. The mirror above it showed a woman I almost didn't recognize. My face was too pale, the faint lines deeper, my eyes too wide. I looked like someone who had seen something she could never unsee. "Just a few days," I whispered to my reflection. "You're just packing for a few days." I opened drawers and pulled out underwear, socks, a couple of shirts, a pair of comfortable pants. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would make it look like I was going anywhere special. I added my toiletries bag from the bathroom, my hairbrush, my medication bottle. The motions were automatic, familiar, but my chest ached with every item I placed in the bag. It felt like I was packing to leave a hospital where I hadn't been admitted yet. When I turned back toward the bed, my eyes landed on the photo frame on the nightstand. It was the picture from last Christmas. The three of us stood in front of the tree in the living room. The lights were blurred in the background, little orbs of gold and red. Caleb was on my right, one arm slung casually around my shoulders. Riley was on my left, leaning in and kissing my cheek. My head was tilted slightly toward her, my eyes half closed in mid-laugh. We were all smiling. If you showed this photo to a stranger, they'd say it was a happy family. They'd say I was lucky. They'd say, "You must feel so loved." I picked up the frame with both hands, my fingers pressing into the smooth edge. Last Christmas, 8 or 9 months ago. By then, according to Dennis, the system downstairs had probably already been running. Those thin tubes had already been warm. Those liquids already moving. Those timers already blinking red in the dark. I tried to remember how I'd felt that day. I remembered being tired. I remembered sitting down halfway through cooking dinner because my legs felt weak. I remembered laughing when I almost forgot to put the rolls in the oven, making a joke about your mom losing her mind. Had they already started keeping track then? Had they already been watching me, not out of concern, but to see if their experiment was working? The room tilted slightly. I sat down on the edge of the bed before I fell. The photo shook in my hands. I wiped at my eyes, angry at the tears blurring the glass. For a few seconds, I thought about putting the picture face down in the drawer, leaving it here, letting it rot with the lies it now contained. Instead, I slid it into the side pocket of my bag. Not as a keepsake of a happy Christmas, not as proof that my children loved me. As evidence. As a reminder. A reminder that even a photograph of love can be taken while something monstrous is already growing in the shadows. A reminder that smiles can hide teeth. I zipped the bag slowly and stood up. My legs still felt weak, but they held. Downstairs, I could hear faint voices, Dennis's low rumble, a lighter, higher one answering, Riley. My heart jolted painfully against my ribs. I took a breath that didn't feel like it reached my lungs and walked toward the door. Each step down the hallway echoed inside my head. At the top of the stairs, I paused. From there, I could see into the kitchen. Riley stood by the counter in her pajamas, an oversized t-shirt with some faded band logo, plaid pants that hung loosely at her hips. Her hair was twisted into a messy knot on top of her head. She held a mug in both hands, fingers wrapped around it for warmth. Her face was softer than usual, the edges of her sadness smoothed slightly by sleep. She was smiling. Dennis was by the sink, toolbox on the floor at his feet, posture relaxed but eyes watchful. He was saying something about older houses always having surprises, and Riley was laughing quietly, that small, tired laugh I'd heard a lot this past year. "Thank you for coming so fast," she was saying. "Mom worries about this house, you know. Every little noise, she thinks it's something big." I forced my feet to move. "Sometimes the little noises are worth checking," Dennis replied. His tone was light. If I hadn't seen his face in the basement, I'd have believed it. Riley looked up as I reached the bottom step. "There you are," she said. "We were talking about you." "I hope he didn't tell you I'm a difficult customer," I tried to joke. "Only in the way all moms are," Dennis said smoothly. "Everything's a crisis until it's fixed." He was playing his role now. Plumber, nothing more. Riley's eyes flicked to the bag hanging from my shoulder, then to my handbag in my hand. "Are you going out?" she asked. "Where are you going?" My heart hammered so hard I wondered if she could hear it. "Just some bank stuff," I said, aiming for casual. My voice felt too tight in my throat. "Paperwork, boring things." "Oh," she took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down. "Do you want me to come with you? I don't have anything to do this morning. We could grab lunch after, maybe. Get out of the house a bit." For one insane second, I almost said yes. The oldest instinct in me wanted my daughter beside me, safe, normal, talking about anything but leaking ceilings and poisoned air. Dennis shifted slightly, just enough that I could see his face. He didn't say a word. He didn't shake his head. He just gave me a look, a very small, very loaded look. Don't. That's sweet, honey, I said, tightening my grip on my bag until my knuckles ached. But it's really going to be boring. Just forms and signatures. You'd hate it. She wrinkled her nose. I don't mind. I could help. You know how you get with too many forms. We could grab coffee afterward. The way she said, help crawled under my skin in a way it never had before. I'm fine, I said quickly, too quickly. I forced myself to slow down. Really, you stay, rest. You were up late again last night. I heard you walking around. She shrugged, looking away for a second. Just couldn't sleep. Then sleep now, I said gently. I'll be back later. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, disappointment, calculation. I couldn't tell. I hated that I was even trying to read that into my own daughter's expression. Dennis cleared his throat softly. I've finished what I can for now, he said, stepping slightly closer, playing his part to the end. I'll need to come back later to double-check a few things once things dry out a bit, but it's stable for the moment. Thank you, I said, focusing on him because it was easier than looking at Riley. How much do I owe you? He named an amount that was so reasonable it almost hurt. I dug into my handbag, pulled out my wallet, and handed him the cash. Our fingers brushed for a second. His touch was firm, grounding. Appreciate it, he said, slipping the money into his pocket. We'll talk more later about the other thing. The other thing. Riley's gaze snapped between us. What other thing? She asked lightly, but her eyes had sharpened just a fraction. Just some older piping, Dennis said smoothly, not missing a beat. Might need to be upgraded in a few months. Nothing urgent yet. I'll give your mom some options. He picked up his toolbox and straightened. To anyone else, it would look like a man finishing a job, ready to leave. To me, the way he met my eyes for that brief second said something else entirely. Time to go. Well, I said, forcing my lips into something like a smile. I should get moving if I want to be back before dinner. I can make dinner tonight, Riley offered quickly. So you don't have to rush, take your time. Normally, that would have warmed me. Today, it made my skin crawl. That's kind of you, I said softly. We'll see. I walked to the front door, each step feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. My bag bumped lightly against my hip. The keys jingled faintly in my hand. At the door, I paused and turned. Riley was standing in the kitchen doorway, her mug back in her hands, her hair falling loose now around her face. She looked younger like that, softer, like the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Don't worry about the leak, she said. We'll handle it. The words hit harder than they should have. I'm sure you will, I replied. I opened the door. The outside air hit me like a slap. It was cool and fresh and completely ordinary, but after the heavy stillness of the house, it felt almost violent. I took a deep breath, the kind you take when you step off a plane in a different country. Behind me, the house sat quiet and neat, the same way it always had. The same front porch, the same flower pots, the same doormat I'd shaken out 100 times. You'd never know that beneath its foundation, tucked behind the furnace. Something was humming quietly, counting down. Dennis's truck was parked at the curb, a little dent on the side of the bed, paint faded from years in the sun. He walked ahead of me, opened the passenger door, and waited. My legs felt like they didn't fully belong to me as I went down the front steps. Each step away from the door felt less like walking and more like ripping stitches. I climbed into the truck, the seat slightly scratchy under my hands. Dennis closed the door gently, like he was afraid it might break me. Through the windshield, I could see my house perfectly framed. The curtains in the living room, the wreath on the door, the window of my bedroom upstairs, where the vent had been feeding me poisoned air while I slept. The front door stayed closed. No one burst out after me. No one yelled my name. Everything stayed quiet. Dennis got in on his side, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. As we drove down the street, my house began to shrink in the side mirror. First, it was still big, taking up the whole frame. Then it was smaller, just another house on a line of houses. Then it was nothing but a blur of cream and brick and shadows. I kept watching until it disappeared completely. That was the moment it hit me, fully and finally. For the first time in 40 years, I had no idea if I was ever coming back. The drive felt like moving through a photograph someone else had taken of my life. I knew these streets. I'd driven them 1,000 times, to the grocery store, to church, to parent-teacher conferences, to my husband's memorial. I could have traced them with my eyes closed. But sitting in Dennis's truck, my bag at my feet and my house shrinking somewhere behind us, everything looked wrong. The bakery on the corner where I used to buy birthday cakes might as well have been a cardboard cutout. The park where Caleb had scraped his knees on the sidewalk looked like a place I'd once seen in a movie instead of somewhere I'd pushed a stroller. Even the traffic lights looked colder, the red harsher, the green more impatient. I stared out the window, hands folded tightly in my lap, while my brain tried to catch up with my body. "This isn't happening," a part of me kept whispering. "You had coffee this morning. You wiped down the counters. Your daughter thanked a plumber in her pajamas. This is just a strange day. You'll be home tonight." The louder part of me remembered the warm tube under my fingers and didn't believe a word of it. Dennis drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes scanning the road with a focus that made it clear he wasn't just thinking about speed limits. He checked the mirrors often, not in a paranoid way exactly, in a careful way, the way people do when they know the world is not always kind. "We're going to stop at a coffee shop up ahead," he said after a few minutes. His voice was calm, grounding. "It's usually quiet this time of day. We'll sit down, talk through this properly, then we'll call the right people." "The right people," I repeated hollowly. "You mean the police?" "Yes." The word sent a dull thud through my chest. The coffee shop was one I'd driven past countless times and never gone into. A small brick building on a side street, narrow windows, a simple sign with a painted cup and the word harbor in cursive underneath. It looked unremarkable in the way safe places often do. Dennis pulled into the lot and parked near the side entrance instead of the front. I noticed that. I noticed everything now. "Can you walk okay?" he asked, turning off the engine. I nodded, though my legs still felt like they were made of something unreliable. Inside, the shop was warm and dim in a comforting way. Wooden floors, scuffed in places, creaked faintly underfoot. Mismatched wooden tables and chairs were scattered around, some occupied by people hunched over laptops, others by pairs talking quietly. Soft music played from speakers hidden somewhere overhead, the kind that didn't demand attention. The air was thick with the smell of fresh coffee, baked bread, and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. If I squinted, I could almost pretend we were here for something normal. A catch-up with an old friend, a break from errands, not hiding from my own children. Dennis steered us gently toward the back. He chose a small table tucked near a rear exit, half shadowed by a tall potted plant. From here, he could see both the main door and the side entrance. The back door was a few steps away. I noticed that too. He pulled out a chair for me, then sat with his back to the wall. A waitress in her 20s came over, pen and notepad in hand. She had tired eyes but a kind smile. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Coffee for both of us," Dennis said. "Black for me and whatever she'd like." "Just regular coffee," I managed. My voice sounded rusty. "And maybe—" I didn't feel hungry, but my hands were still shaking. "A slice of cake if you have something with chocolate." "We've got chocolate fudge today," she said. "Want me to warm it up a little?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself. "That would be nice." She nodded, scribbled on her pad, and walked away. Dennis waited until she'd moved out of earshot before leaning forward slightly, forearms resting on the table. "Okay," he said. "We need to talk about your options." The word options sounded so painfully sensible compared to the chaos in my head. "I know this is a lot," he said, More than anyone should have to process in a day, but we don't have the luxury of pretending it didn't happen. So, option 1. He held up a finger. We call the police right now. From here, we tell them everything we know. I tell them what I found. You tell them how you've been feeling, what you've seen. They send a unit to your house, secure the scene, and request a warrant to inspect the basement. If they find what I found, they'll treat it as attempted murder. They'll bring your children in for questioning. Depending on what they say and what else is found, they could be arrested as early as today. The image slammed into me. Caleb in handcuffs, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Riley, pale and shaking, being led into a car by officers, her hands twisted behind her back. Their faces turned toward me as I watched from a distance. My stomach twisted so hard, I had to press a hand against it. I swallowed. I don't know if I can. I'm not saying that's what will happen, he said quietly. I'm saying that's on the table. If the police treat this the way they should, that's the likely route. And if they do, I asked bitterly. If they decide I'm just a confused old woman and this is all some misunderstanding. His jaw tightened. Then option 1 becomes a lot messier, he admitted, which brings us to option 2. The waitress returned then, placing a mug of coffee in front of each of us, and setting a small plate with a generous slice of chocolate cake in front of me. The frosting glistened under the lights, slightly melted around the edges. The plate was warm. You need anything else, Holler, she said, then moved to another table. I stared at the cake for a second. It looked indecently normal. Option 2, Dennis continued, once we were alone again, is that we get more evidence before we make the call. More than a murder device in my basement? I asked, my voice harsher than I meant. More than my word and your word, he said evenly. Police work on evidence, not feelings. I can't walk into a station and say, I saw something weird in a house, and expect them to kick in doors. We need photographs, video, something that shows clearly what's down there before anyone has a chance to clean it up. I wrapped my hands around my mug, the heat seeping slowly into my fingers. You want to go back, I said slowly, to my house while they're there. Yes, he said, as the plumber who realized he forgot to check one thing or wants to double-check the repair. I still have a legitimate reason to be there today. If I show up again, no one will be surprised. If I get into the basement, I can take pictures from multiple angles. If I can, I'll get close-ups of the labels on those containers, the connections to the ducts. Maybe even swipe a little sample from around the seals. He took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down carefully. If we have that, he said, then when we call the police, they won't be starting from zero. They'll know exactly what to look for, and if... He hesitated. If someone in that house gets nervous and tries to tear it all out, he continued, we'll have proof that it existed, that it was installed, that it was operating. Fear slid through me, cold and oily. And what if they catch you? I asked. What if they realize you know too much? He gave a small, humorless smile. Then I'll look like a nosy plumber who poked where he shouldn't have, he said. Which technically would be true, but I've dealt with angry clients before. People who didn't like my quote, didn't like my work. I can handle that. I can walk away, call the police from outside, and point them to what I saw. He hesitated again, then added, I'd rather they be angry at me than free to keep me doing this to you. A lump formed in my throat. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. Most people would have fixed the leak, taken the money, and left. Maybe made an anonymous tip, if even that. Why are you staying? He looked down at his hands for a moment, turning his wedding band around his finger absent-mindedly. When he looked up, his eyes were different, more distant, like he was seeing something far away. Because I've seen something like this before, he said. Different details, same pattern. I stayed quiet. He didn't need encouragement. It was like a dam had cracked. My mother started getting sick about 10 years ago, he began. Little things at first, forgetting her keys, losing her train of thought mid-sentence, being tired all the time. Everyone said it was normal. She's getting older, Dennis, that's what happens. Her doctor hinted at early dementia, maybe just stress, grief from losing my dad. He shrugged one shoulder. I wanted to believe them, I did believe them. He took another sip of coffee. eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. My younger brother moved in with her after Dad died, he continued. Said he'd take care of her, help with bills, drive her to appointments. I thought he was doing me a favor. I was working long hours, had my own family to keep afloat. I was grateful he stepped up. The way he said grateful made my skin crawl. Over time, Mom's symptoms got worse, he said. More confusion, more weakness. Some days she'd sound like herself. Other days she'd call me and sound wrong, slurred words, drowsy. My brother always had an explanation. She didn't sleep well. She took her meds twice. She's just tired, Dennis. Stop worrying. He rubbed his thumb over a faint coffee stain on the table. I told myself he'd never hurt her, Dennis said. He was her baby. She loved him. She helped him out of every mess he ever got into. He's just stressed, I thought. He's struggling, but he loves her. So I ignored things that didn't sit right, like how she'd have new bruises from bumping into things, like how he started being vague about her prescriptions, like how the pharmacy bills didn't quite line up with what she was supposed to be taking. My chest tightened. The cake sat untouched, heavy and sweet on its plate. Then one day, she ended up in the hospital, he said softly. Collapsed in the kitchen. My brother called the ambulance. When I got there, the doctors were talking about medication interactions, dosage issues. They were confused about what exactly she'd been taking. He drew in a breath through his nose. Turns out my brother had been adjusting her meds, Dennis said. Giving her extra of some, less of others, swapping pills for cheaper versions, selling some of her prescriptions for cash. He started small, just shaving here and there. Then it escalated. She was a quiet, lonely old woman living in a house full of pill bottles, and he was in debt. It doesn't take a genius to guess the rest. He looked at me, and there was something raw in his eyes now. She trusted him, he said. Completely. Even when she was half-conscious, she defended him, said he was doing his best, said he'd never hurt her. Sound familiar? It did, too much. They never proved outright intent to kill, he went on. There were no clear poisoning agents, just a mess of negligent, greedy choices. He got a slap on the wrist, some probation, a ruined reputation. Mom came home weaker, more confused than before. She never fully understood what he'd done. She died a year later. He swallowed hard. I still wake up some nights thinking about every little sign I ignored, he said. Every time I told myself I was being dramatic. Every time I chose to believe the more comfortable story instead of the one the facts were pointing to. If I'd stepped in sooner, pushed harder, maybe she would have had a few more good years. Maybe she would have died on her own terms instead of because her own son treated her like a walking pharmacy. Silence wrapped around us. The hum of the coffee shop faded into the background, small and distant. I couldn't save her, he said, his voice low. I can't go back and fix that. But when I walked into your basement today and saw that setup, I promised myself a long time ago that if I ever saw something like this again, I wouldn't look away. I wouldn't make excuses for anyone. I wouldn't leave another mother alone with people who saw her as a problem to solve instead of a person to protect. My eyes stung. I blinked hard, but a tear slipped free anyway, sliding hot down my cheek. I'm sorry, I said, my voice cracking. About your mother, about your brother. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. You don't need to be sorry for something you didn't do, he said. What you can do is not let your kids' faces talk you out of your own survival. I let out a shaky breath and finally picked up my fork. I cut a small piece of cake, more for something to do with my hands than because I wanted it, and took a bite. The chocolate was rich and sweet, completely at odds with the conversation. It grounded me in a strange way. So, my voice was steadier when I spoke again. Option 2 is you go back, you get proof, you come back here or wherever, and then we call the police. Yes, he said. I'll drop you somewhere safe first. A hotel, maybe. Somewhere your kids wouldn't think to look right away. I'll go back to your place alone. I'll act like a professional finishing a job, and I'll get what we need. And if something happens, I asked quietly, if they catch you in the basement taking pictures of their whatever that thing is. He gave that small, humorless smile again. Then I'll deal with it, he said. I'm a big boy. They can yell, they can threaten to write a bad review, they can tell me never to come back. What they can't do is erase the fact that I know what I saw, or stop us from calling the police after I walk out. My chest felt tight and hot all at once. I don't want you getting hurt because of me, I said. I'm not doing this just because of you, he replied. I'm doing this because this kind of thing is wrong, and I am in a position to do something about it. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wishing I'd done more. Once was enough. I looked at him then, really looked at him. Not just as the man who'd walked into my house to fix a leak, but as someone who had lived through his own private nightmare and was now standing between me and mine. You're not just a plumber, I said quietly. He huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh. My back would disagree, he said, then his face softened. But no, not today. I stared at the swirl of steam, rising from my coffee. Okay, I said finally. The word felt like jumping off a ledge. We do it your way, evidence first, then the police. You're sure? He asked. I won't push you into anything you don't agree with. This is your life, your family, your call. I'm sure, I said. If I see Caleb and Riley in handcuffs without knowing we did everything right, everything we could, I don't know if I'll survive that either. I need to know we have something solid. I need to know we're not walking into the station with just fear and guesses. He nodded, a small, firm dip of his head. Then that's what we'll do, he said. We'll get you somewhere safe first. Then I'll go back. I'll text you when I'm done, and then we'll go to the police together. You won't have to walk in there alone. The phrase, you won't have to walk in there alone, hit me harder than I expected. For the first time since the drip woke me in the night, I felt something other than terror. It wasn't hope exactly. Hope felt too big, too bright. But it was something like it. A thin, stubborn thread of belief that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone in this as I thought. Okay, I said again more quietly. Come back to me. I will, he said. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, I believed him. Dennis didn't waste time, once we'd settled on the plan. We were still at the table in the coffee shop, the cake half eaten, when he shifted gears from emotions to something colder. Joan, he said, fingers laced around his mug, I need to ask you a blunt question. At this point, I said, I'm not sure there are any gentle ones left. He almost smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. If you died tomorrow, he asked, what would your kids get? The question landed like a stone. You mean money? I asked. Money, assets, the house, insurance, everything. I know it's uncomfortable, but people don't build a system like that in a basement for fun. Whatever this is, it has a motive. I'd bet my toolbox that money is part of it. I stared into my coffee. A faint rainbow swirled on the surface from the sheen of the mug. My husband had a life insurance policy, I said slowly. It paid out after he died. I used some of it to pay off debts. The rest went into savings, CDs, retirement accounts. I exhaled. And I've worked my whole life, saved where I could. I was never extravagant. He nodded once, ballpark number. I hesitated. Saying it out loud made it feel like I was handing him something private. Maybe 300,000, I said quietly. Between the accounts, a little more depending on the market. He didn't react, just listened. And the house? He asked. I glanced toward the window, though I couldn't see it from here. We bought it for nothing, I said. Back when this area was anything, just a quiet neighborhood with old trees and bad sidewalks. But the last 10 years, everything's changed. New restaurants, new condos, people with dogs and fancy strollers. I gave a humorless smile. Realtors keep leaving flyers in my mailbox. We have buyers for your home. Have you had it appraised recently? He asked. A few years ago, I said. Roughly 500,000 back then, probably more now. The woman who sent the last flyer told me I could get well over 6 if I was willing to sell to developers. He did the math faster than I could. So between savings and the property, he said, you're sitting on something like $800,000, maybe more. Hearing it framed that way made my stomach twist. To me, it wasn't one big number. It was a lifetime of small choices. Coupons, second-hand furniture, skipping vacations. To someone desperate, Dennis said quietly. That's not just security, that's a solution. I flinched. Don't, I whispered. Don't say it like that. I'm not saying it to hurt you, he replied. I'm saying it because the people who planned this didn't see you as a mother or a person. They saw you as access to that number. I gripped my mug tighter. Well, I said after a beat, they'd get it eventually anyway, when I die. That's how it works. Would they, though? He asked. Is it that simple? I frowned. What do you mean? Your will, he said. Who gets what and under what conditions? You have one, right? Yes, I said. I actually grabbed it from the safe before we left. The bag at my feet suddenly felt heavier. It leaves everything to them, half each. There's no one else. No cousins, no siblings, just Caleb and Riley. All of it, he asked. House accounts policy balance 50-50. Yes, a bitter laugh slipped out. I thought it was generous, loving, simple, no fighting. Does it say anything about circumstances? He asked. Like what happens if your death is the result of a crime? I blinked at him. I don't remember. The lawyer talked about something like that when we signed the papers, some clause. If any beneficiary is involved in or benefits from the unlawful death. I squinted, trying to recall the exact words. I think he said if one of them caused my death, they'd be disqualified. Maybe both if they tried to cover it up. Dennis nodded slowly. That's standard in a lot of places. You can't kill someone and then inherit from them. Courts don't like rewarding murder. The words kill someone made my skin crawl. So if I dropped dead tomorrow and they figured out someone had been messing with my air vents, I swallowed. They'd lose everything. Exactly, he said. If your death looked suspicious, it wouldn't just be a criminal case. It would be a financial disaster for them. No house, no savings, no insurance, just charges, maybe prison. I stared at the scratched wood of the table. But, he continued, if you just got weaker and weaker over time, headaches, fatigue, confusion, a fall, a heart issue, something that could be linked to age and stress. He spread his hands slightly. Then the will goes through. No one questions a natural decline. They cry at the funeral, talk about how fast it all happened, and 6 months later they're arguing with a realtor about whether the kitchen needs an upgrade before listing the house. The worst part was that I could picture it, too clearly. So they needed it to look like, I started. Like bad luck, he finished. Like mom just got old, not like a crime. My chest felt wrapped in barbed wire. We left the coffee shop after that. The world outside was too bright. The sun had climbed higher, flattening the color out of everything. The hotel Dennis chose was one of those mid-range chains near the highway. Big enough to be anonymous, forgettable enough to be safe. The kind of place people stay when they're in transition, between flights, between jobs, between lives. He parked near a side entrance again, away from the main doors. The automatic doors sighed open when we approached, spilling cool, air-conditioned air over us. The lobby was all beige and dark wood. Beige sofas, beige carpet with a pattern meant to hide stains, beige lamps. A muted TV played news in the corner with the sound off. A few people sat scattered around, looking at phones, not looking at each other. Dennis went to the front desk, while I hung back a step, feeling oddly like a child waiting for a parent to check us in. Checking in, he told the young man behind the counter. One room, quiet floor if you've got it. The clerk clicked around on his computer. We've got a king on the second floor, away from the elevators, he said. Room 203. That'll do, Dennis replied. He slid over his ID and a credit card without a second thought. Just you, Mr. Ward, the clerk asked. Yes, Dennis said smoothly. My aunt will be visiting for a bit. She's had a rough day. I'll be back and forth. He didn't look at me as he said it. He didn't need to. The lie fit easily in the world's expectations. Older woman, younger relative, vague trouble. The keycards clicked on the counter. Enjoy your stay, the clerk said, already half-turned toward the next task. The elevator ride-up was mercifully empty. The hallway on the second floor was quiet, the hum of the air conditioner filling the space. Room 203 was halfway down. Dennis slid the card in, the light blinked green, and the lock clicked. The room was exactly what I expected, and somehow still surreal. A large bed with a white comforter and too many pillows. A generic painting of a landscape over the headboard. Some imaginary countryside with a winding river and trees that cast no shadows. A small desk. A TV mounted on the wall. A window that looked out over the parking lot and a strip of grass. It smelled faintly of cleaning product and something citrus. I stepped inside and felt immediately disoriented. No family photos. No worn spots in the carpet, no memory attached to anything. "I know it's not home," Dennis said quietly, closing the door behind us. "But that's sort of the point." He walked the perimeter of the room like he was doing an inspection. "Okay," he said, "let's go over a few things." He went to the window first, checking the latch. "These stay locked," he said. "If you want fresh air, we can crack it later, but for now, keep it sealed." He moved to the door, pointed to the metal latch and the deadbolt. "When I leave, you lock this," he said. "Both the handle lock and the deadbolt. Use the latch. Don't open this door for anyone but me or hotel staff you can clearly identify. If someone says they're from the front desk and you're not sure, call down there yourself to confirm." His thoroughness should have scared me more than it comforted me, but strangely, it did both. "I'm not helpless," I muttered, more out of reflex than anything. "I know," he said, not offended. "But people who are being targeted are allowed to accept a little extra caution. It's not a weakness, it's strategy." I sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under my weight, unfamiliar but solid. "Do you have everything you need?" he asked. "Medications, phone, charger, your documents." I nodded. "They're in my bag." "If you get hungry, there's a menu on the desk," he said. "You can call down and order something, or we can grab you something before I go back if you'd rather." The idea of food made my stomach flip. "I'll be fine," I said, "for now." He studied me for a moment, as if weighing whether I was about to crack. "I'll go back to the house," he said finally. "I'll play the part, do what I need to do, and then I'll come back here. We'll go to the police together after that. I won't leave you in limbo any longer than necessary." "How long?" I asked. "A couple of hours, maybe less," he said. "You'll hear from me. If anything feels wrong, you call the front desk, then you call 911. Understand?" It hit me, suddenly and sharply, that Dennis was about to walk back into the home I had just fled from. Walk back into my kitchen. Look my children in the eye. Walk down into the basement where that machine hummed quietly behind the furnace. "Be careful," I said, the words coming out more desperate than I intended. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. "I will." Then he was gone. The door closed with a soft click. The room seemed to expand around the sound. I got up immediately and did what he told me, locked the handle, turned the deadbolt, slid the metal latch into place. The solid thud of it gave me a tiny sense of control. Then I sat back down on the bed and finally let silence settle. It was a different kind of quiet than the house. No pipes creaking, no distant television from Riley's room, no hum of the old refrigerator. Just the low, constant drone of the air conditioner and the faint, muffled sounds of a hotel existing somewhere out of sight. I took my phone out of my bag and set it on the bed in front of me. For a minute, I just stared at it. My mind drifted back over the last year, little conversations I'd brushed aside at the time. Caleb in the kitchen one evening, leaning against the counter, beer in hand. "Mom, this house is too big for you," he'd said. "You're running yourself ragged trying to keep up with it. Have you thought about moving to something smaller? Maybe one of those nice senior apartments? You'd make a killing if you sold this place right now." I remembered laughing it off. "And where would you and Riley live then?" I joked. "Under a bridge." He'd smiled, but it hadn't quite reached his eyes. "We'd figure something out," he'd said. "You need to think about yourself for once." At the time, it had felt like concern. An annoying kind of concern, but concern. Now, in this bland hotel room with the locked door, it sounded different. Like someone tapping the walls to see how much they were worth. Riley sitting at the dining room table one night, scrolling on her phone while I sorted mail. "Hey, Mom," she asked, not looking up. "Do you have long-term care insurance? Like, if you ever needed a nursing home or a home health aide or something." I'd frowned, surprised by the question. "Why are you asking me that?" "I just saw a story," she'd said quickly, "about how expensive it all is. I was curious if you're covered." "I have basic coverage," I said, "and some savings, and 2 children who will hopefully visit me so I don't go completely senile." She'd flashed a small smile. "Just making sure," she'd said. At the time, I'd thought, look at her, worried about me. Now the memory tasted sour. It sounded less like worry and more like reconnaissance, taking inventory. My phone lit up suddenly. A text. "Riley. Mom, where are you?" My chest clenched. I stared at the message for a long time without typing anything. Another bubble appeared. "Riley. You've been out a while. Everything okay?" The words were simple, things any daughter might text her mother. That should have been reassuring. Instead, in the context of a warm plastic tube feeding something into my vents, they felt like hands reaching out to locate me, to tag me, to confirm whether the experiment subject was still in the maze. A third bubble appeared before I could decide whether to answer. "Riley. Did the plumber say anything weird?" A chill crawled slowly up my spine. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct I'd spent a lifetime building wanted to tell the truth. To say yes and no and help me, and what did you do all at once? Instead, I heard Dennis's voice in my head. "If they think you know, they have no reason to be patient anymore." I typed with shaking hands. "Just running errands. Banks, papers, long line, I'm fine, be home later." I hit send before I could overthink it. The 3 dots popped up almost immediately, then stopped, then started again. It felt less like a conversation, and more like someone packing back and forth. For the first time, really and truly, I felt it. Not just fear, not just betrayal. The cold realization of being watched, of being measured, of being monitored like a project. I set the phone down slowly, as if it might explode, and lay back on the bed, staring up at the blank hotel ceiling. Somewhere between that ceiling and the one in my dining room, a line had been crossed that I could never uncross. The hotel room felt smaller the longer I sat in it. At first, when the door clicked shut behind Dennis, I was just grateful for walls that didn't feel like they were breathing with me. 4 beige walls, a bed that wasn't mine, a window that looked out over a parking lot and a strip of grass. It was anonymous enough to feel safe. But anonymity has edges. After a while, it started to feel like I'd been dropped into a blank space and told to wait for my life to decide what to do with me. The air conditioner hummed steadily. The curtains swayed ever so slightly every time the unit kicked on. Somewhere down the hall, a door shut, muffled. A TV murmured faintly through a wall. The world went on. My world sat on the bed in front of me, black rectangles, screen dark. I stared at my phone like it might lunge at me. When it finally lit up again, my heart punched the inside of my chest. "Riley. Mom, you've been out a long time. Are you okay?" Perfectly normal words, the kind a good daughter sends. My thumb hovered over the screen. I heard Dennis in my head again, stay vague. Errands, banks, boring things, nothing they can use, nothing that proves where you are. I took a breath and typed slowly. "Just busy today. Banks, paperwork, a little shopping, I'm fine." My finger hesitated over send for half a second, like the phone might explode if I touched it. Then I tapped. The message whooshed out, that tiny sound impossibly loud in the quiet room. The 3 dots popped up almost instantly. "Riley. What kind of shopping?" There it was. Before today, I would have answered this sort of thing automatically. Shirts at the mall, new dish towels, a book I didn't need. Little details, small talk between a lonely mother and a daughter who lived with her but was emotionally very far away. Now it read differently, not curiosity, a probe. I forced myself to wait a few seconds before replying, like I wasn't sitting here with the phone in my hand and my pulse tapping in my throat. Nothing exciting, just looking. Might pick up some groceries later. Another beat, another set of dots. Riley, do you want me to pick you up? I can come get you so you don't have to drive back tired. She was worried, I told myself. That's what this sounded like, worry. Except it slid under my skin like something else entirely. Where are you, was what I heard. Who are you with? Did you go straight to the bank like you said? I stared at the screen, my mouth suddenly dry. No need, I typed. I'm fine. I won't be late. I added a little smile emoji before I could stop myself, then immediately hated it. It looked desperate, like I was trying too hard to seem normal. The dots appeared, vanished, reappeared. Riley. Okay, just seems unlike you to be out all day. Text me when you're on your way home. Before I would have read that and thought, she notices. She pays attention after all. Now, sitting in a room several miles away from my own bed, I heard something else. She had a clock in her head labeled Mom, and the needle was in the red. I didn't answer that one right away. I put the phone down next to me, as if a few inches of distance could soften what it meant. The air conditioner kicked on again. I watched the curtain lift, then fall. 20 minutes crawled by. I tried turning on the TV, flipped past a cooking show, a daytime talk show, some crime series that suddenly felt a little too on the nose. I turned it off again. The silence rushed back in. I told myself not to stare at the phone. I stared anyway. It buzzed against the bedspread. Not a text this time. Caleb. His name on the screen made my stomach plummet, as if the floor had opened under the bed. I could have let it go to voicemail. In theory. In reality, my thumb was already sliding to answer before that thought fully formed. Hi, I said, aiming for light, landing somewhere closer to strained. Mom. His voice was low and flat, that familiar end-of-a-long-day tone. Where are you? Straight to it. No hello, no lead-in. I told Riley, I said carefully. I'm just out doing some things, banks, papers, you know. He was quiet for a second. What kind of things? He asked. That question shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. It was so small, so ordinary. But coming from him, right now, it felt like fingers around my wrist. Bank stuff, I said. You know how long they make you wait just to sign a couple of forms. I gave a shaky laugh. Then I thought I might stop by a few places, see if there are any sales, just keeping busy. Another pause. Since when do you keep busy by being out all day? He said. You hate being out that long. You always say your feet start hurting if you're on them too much. I closed my eyes. I could see him in my mind, standing in the kitchen with his work boots still on, leaning against the counter, watching me over the rim of a beer bottle. Cataloging. I'm sitting when I can, I said. I'm not running a marathon. You didn't say anything about this morning, he went on, as if I hadn't spoken. You made coffee, worried about the leak, told me to have a good day at work. Nothing about spending the whole afternoon doing whatever. I don't have to file an itinerary with you every day, Caleb, I said, sharper than I meant. Fear will do that. It puts teeth on everything. I'm not saying you do, he replied, his tone cool, measured. I'm saying this is out of character. You're usually home by early afternoon. You watch your shows, you make dinner. You go to bed around 10. That's your routine. Has been for years. My lungs felt too small. He said it like he was reciting a schedule from memory, like he'd written it down somewhere. Wake up, 6:00. Coffee, 6:15. News, 7:00. Lunch, 12:30. Dinner, 6:30. Bed, 10:00. My life, apparently, was something you could map. You're paying a lot of attention, I said, trying to sound amused and failing. You make me sound very predictable. You are predictable, he said. That's not an insult. It's just true. And now, all of a sudden, you disappear all day without telling anyone where you're going. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Strange to him, dangerous for them. Somewhere in the back of my mind, the device in the basement blinked red. If you were timing the flow of poison into someone's bedroom, you'd want their habits. You'd want to know when they were in bed, when they were in the kitchen, when they were out of the house. You'd want everything calibrated so the doses hit when they were alone, when no one else would be there to share the air. You want their routine locked down so tightly that even a single day away set off alarm bells. I didn't realize I had to ask permission to go sign papers and buy shampoo, I said quietly. That's not what I'm saying, he insisted. I'm saying you're not acting like yourself, Mom. First the leak, now you disappearing and sending weird vague texts to Riley, and you sound off. Weird vague texts. Off how? I asked, my fingers tightening around the phone. He exhaled, the sound loud in my ear. Tired, distracted. You've been like that for months, he said. You forget things, you leave the stove on, you repeat yourself, you lose track of what day it is. I've mentioned this before, so has Riley. Anger flared under my skin, quick and sharp. I wanted to say, yes, I've been tired, because someone's been feeding something into my air vents like I'm a lab rat. Instead, I heard myself say, everyone gets tired. I'm not 25 anymore. This is more than that, he said. You know it is. You've been having headaches, dizziness. You almost fell down the stairs last month, remember? You brushed it off. You always brush everything off. There was a strange rhythm to the way he listed my symptoms. Not casual, not conversational. Like he'd rehearsed it. You need to see a doctor, he said. A real doctor, not just some urgent care. We need someone to do a full workup. Blood tests, scans, the works, rule out anything serious. You think I'm making this up? I asked, stung. No, he said quickly. I think something is wrong, and pretending it's just age isn't helping anyone. We need documentation, a baseline. If your memory is going, we need that on record so we can plan. On record. The phrase slid into place like a puzzle piece I hadn't realized was missing. They didn't just want me sick. They wanted paperwork. A file that said, patient exhibits signs of cognitive decline, fatigue, possible early onset dementia. So when I inevitably forgot things or got confused about conversations, they could point to it and say, see, it's all in the notes. If I went to the police later and said, my children are trying to kill me, they could wave a folder and say, she's not well. She's been saying strange things for months. Mom, he said when I didn't answer immediately, are you still there? Yes, I said. My mouth felt full of sand. Good, he said. Listen, I'm not trying to gang up on you, but Riley and I have been talking. You've been getting worse. We can't just let that go. We need to make sure you're safe. If you're wandering around alone all day, forgetting where you're going. I know exactly where I am, I cut in, sharper than before. I know what day it is. I know who I'm talking to. I forgot my keys a few times, Caleb. That doesn't mean I'm ready for a nursing home. I didn't say nursing home, he replied, but there was something slippery in his tone. I said planning, putting things in place, so if something happens, we're not scrambling. Planning, I thought. You've been planning for months. I looked at the cheap hotel clock on the nightstand. The red digits told me it had been less than an hour since Dennis left. It felt like another lifetime. I'll make an appointment, I lied, after I finish what I'm doing today. With who? He asked immediately. Dr. Harris, she's been your primary for years. I can call for you if you want, get you in faster. They weren't even going to leave the choice of doctor to me. They'd chosen the narrator for my decline. I can handle it, I said. I'm still capable of dialing a phone. Silence, then more softly, you're angry. I'm tired, I said, and I don't like being interrogated about running errands. I'm not interrogating you, he said. I'm worried, there's a difference. Not anymore, I thought. I'll be home later, I said. We can talk then. Promise, he asked. The word dug under my ribs. Promises used to mean something simple between us. I promise I'll be at your game. I promise I won't forget your birthday. Now it felt like he was asking me to walk willingly back into a maze he'd designed. I'll be home later, I repeated, not saying to stay. There was a pause. Okay, he said at last. Don't do anything strange, okay? Just come back, we'll figure things out. And seriously, Mom, think about that doctor. You've been more tired, more forgetful. We need to get ahead of this. Ahead of this? I pictured a file being opened on a computer marked Ellis Joan. Age, 69. Symptoms, fatigue, confusion, headaches. I pictured Riley nodding gravely in the hallway outside an exam room, saying, yes, she's been like this for months. I'll think about it, I said tightly. Good, he said. Text when you're driving back. We said goodbye. Or rather, he said goodbye. I pressed end before I heard the word. When the line went dead, I realized my hand was shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. I set it down on the bedspread like it was made of glass and backed up until my calves hit the mattress. I sat, then lay back, staring at the ceiling. For months, I'd told myself I was being dramatic, overreacting, reading too much into things because I was lonely and tired, and my world had shrunk down to a house and 2 adult children who barely looked up from their own private storms. Now, lying in a hotel bed with the hotel art blinking down at me, I could see the pattern. They hadn't just noticed my routine. They'd memorized it, built a system around it, timed my symptoms to it. They hadn't just worried about my health. They'd been curating a story about it, one piece at a time, setting the stage for the day someone said, it was just her time and no one asked anything more. I turned my head to look at the clock again. 3:17 p.m. Dennis had said a couple of hours. Check in, act normal, get to the basement, document everything, get out. I imagined him pulling up in front of my house, walking up the walkway, ringing the bell, Riley opening the door with that small, polite smile she used on strangers, Caleb watching from the kitchen. Back already. Forget something. Want another look at that leak. I closed my eyes and pressed the heels of my hands into them until I saw sparks. I wasn't paranoid. They were organized. They were calculating. And they had started building a world where any protest I made could be filed neatly under confusion. I dropped my hands and stared at the ceiling again. 3:19. The red digits blinked over and over, each change a tiny reminder that time was moving whether I was ready or not. I lay there, phone beside me, eyes on the clock, every muscle in my body strung tight, waiting for the message or call that would mean Dennis had seen what he needed to see in the basement and gotten out alive. By the time Dennis came back, I'd memorized the ugly pattern on the hotel carpet. I'd traced it mentally from the bed to the door and back again so many times it felt like a track worn into my brain. The clock on the nightstand flipped from 4:02 to 4:37 to 5:11. Every time the numbers changed, I told myself, he's fine. He's just being careful. He'll come back. Then there was a knock. 3 short, even taps, not frantic, not lazy, just enough. I was off the bed before I registered moving. Who is it? I called, even though I already knew. Dennis, his voice came through the door. It's me. I checked the peephole anyway because that's who I was now. His face filled the small circle, tired, serious, very much alive. I undid the latch, twisted the deadbolt, and opened the door. He stepped inside with a folder under one arm and a camera hanging from his hand by the strap. The moment I saw his face up close, my stomach dropped. He looked worse than when he'd left, not injured, not panicked,